Very good morning to you. Welcome to AM Prime on WESN Content Capital. I'm Keaton Shaw. It's a pleasure to be here once more to have some serious conversations about what's taking place here in sweet Trinidad and Tobago. We have a quite packed program, and my first guest is actually already with us. The topic that we will be discussing this morning is an evacuation plan for the capital of Port of Spain. Now, we are very much familiar with the situations involving any instances that will disrupt the flow of traffic, whether it be from a simple drizzle, which really does have an impact on traffic, to the Water and Sewage Authority actually having to fix a pipeline, or any other situation that somehow or the other causes a backlog. There's been constant debate in regards to the arteries, the entrances and exits to the capital city, but also the infrastructure that is in place to ensure that there is smooth traffic flow, beyond which there's also concerns involving the relevant authorities, whether it be the Trinidad and Tobago Police Service on foot patrols, traffic wardens, or even the ODPM getting involved. Well, such was expressed following severe traffic pileup last week, Wednesday, following heavy rains in the capital city. The priority bus route, which is not usually open to public traffic, well, that was open 7 o'clock in the night when most of the traffic had already disappeared, and closed 5 a.m. the next morning. A similar situation yesterday following heavy rain. So what really is being done, what should be done, and who are those that need to be involved in any evacuation plan for the city of Port of Spain? Well, this morning my guest is Mr. Steve Alvarez. Yes, he is a familiar name. I consider him an intellect, but he's also an individual that has provided many a times on this program and other platforms on WESN plans. He's actually come forward with plans and solutions. Most prominent example is with the water situation here in Trinidad and Tobago, and how simple storage and even the use of gravity can help with our water pressure situation across Trinidad and water distribution and a whole. Mr. Alvarez, good morning. Thank you very much, sir, for joining me on the program.
Good morning, Keaton. Good morning, Trinidad and Tobago.
Well, thank you very much, sir. An evacuation plan for Port of Spain is nothing that is new to our tongues. In fact, the CEO of the ODPM, Mr. Rodney Smart, he has said that a disaster plan has been in place for the city since 2010. But he was not entirely clear whether or not this included an evacuation plan. Now, following last week Wednesday's events, the Minister of Works and Transport, Rowan Sinanan, stood up in Parliament on Friday to say that a plan was in the works. Should we be grateful that something is finally being done about it, or is it just a matter of planning to fail, failing to plan?
Well, Keaton, it's funny. If there is an evacuation plan for Trinidad and Tobago, if there's an emergency plan for dealing with emergencies in Trinidad and Tobago, and I don't know it, and you don't know it, and the average man on the street don't know it, then that plan don't exist. Because the reason for a plan to deal with emergency is to alert the public that in the event of an emergency, this is what you do. You don't wait until the emergency and then you rush out there and tell the people what to do. So for example, let's start from the very beginning. You have to start by saying, this is the emergency plan for Trinidad and Tobago, and it starts with an emergency broadcast system, a system that most people who travel around the world would be aware of, and that is, and when you go in any of the developed world, they say, in the event of an emergency, you will hear this tone or this song, and you would be required to. And so if you were to go to a construction site or so on, or you go to a concert, the people have a safety warning that say, in the event of an emergency, you use this exit and you go to this point, which is your muster point, and so on. No one in Trinidad can tell you that in the event of an emergency, this is the evacuation route. Because evacuation routes, I usually say emergency evacuation routes. The signposts and so on that leads you to know what that is. And there should be, and there would be, and if I'm sure if another government were there and they had proper planning, you were going to see the appropriate signage that's an evacuation route. Right in Carenage right now, on School Street in Carenage, there's a sign that says, in the event of a tsunami, this is one of the evacuation routes, is a tsunami route. It's not very published, but I'm saying we have an idea of what to do, but we just don't do it. We just perhaps don't know how to do it. But it starts with a communication. The second thing that comes in place is that you have to say very clear into people's mind that in the event of emergency, all the traffic, say around the savannah, would be going towards the Lydia or towards Charlotte Street, going out of Port of Spain, and all the traffic going on Ryson Road will be going towards the west. But those things have to be known before, so that when you say emergency plan is now in place, that people know what they have to do. But you can't come until you have a heavy rain and so on, and then you rush to see what to do. It has to be done before, it has to be planned, the routes have to be very clear. Now, the minister said that he's working on an evacuation plan, but that's going to involve the bus route and I think Piccadilly Street and I think Ryson Road. But he is waiting on the technicians to advise him. The thing about it is that it shows a lack of vision. Because if you planned properly for this, if you planned properly, you would know that this is what I want to do. What what are the main routes to get you out of Port of Spain quickly, and at what time? And he explained. Later I heard him say that the reason why I opened the bus route that late is because I wanted the maxi taxis and to get the people out first.
Well, Mr. Alvarez, if I may just interject, and I'm glad that you've raised that point, because if we were to take a look at one of the reports issued in the newspapers the very following day, the head of the Port of Spain division from the TTPS, Superintendent Ali Mohammed, he actually said that they tried to get in contact with the Minister of Works and Transport, and it proved very difficult. They actually could not get in contact with him. So they were not entirely sure if he was aware of what was taking place. Even in regards to the ODPM, they were contacted, but according to CEO Rodney Smart, they monitored the situation, but no official request was made for a risk management organization to step in. So you have to wonder whether or not there is that fair level of communication and that fair level of awareness. A lack of political will for so many other instances, well, we are aware of that and we understand that. But even the communication on the ground to those in authority, that is proving difficult.
Well, that's a very scary scenario we're just talking about it, because you're talking about a little bit of rain and some flood in Port of Spain, and people are rushing to play catch up. Talk to the minister, you call this one, I don't know what to do. It should never have to be at that level. It has to be that in the event of an emergency, the bus route opens going east. Eastern Main Road is one-way traffic going east. The Beetham Highway is one-way traffic going west. You have to work it out before, so that when you press that button and say emergency, everybody, the police service, the taxi guys, the man in the street, everybody knows these are the evacuation routes, and we are now, and it's an emergency, and we're now into that phase where we have to move quickly. Businesses do it. They do it at all their buildings. They say, listen, in the event of an earthquake, in the event of anything, don't use the elevator, you use the staircase. Everybody must be aware of what the emergency plan is. But I also want to tackle something that is very, which is part of the cause in terms of flooding. Now, I don't think that a lot of people in Trinidad and Tobago know that there was a period of almost 10 years, and it's a long time, that's almost 10 years, that you had no flooding on South Key. And the major reason for that is that there was a catchment basin, still there is a catchment basin on South Key. That's where J.N. Hyman, a long time ago, used to have the tire shop and so on. So that's all taken over by the government, and they had a very deep enclosed catchment basin there so that no matter how much the water came, it went right into there and it would stay there until you could pump it out. That catchment basin has not been cleaned, it has never been trenched. So right now, South Street floods again. Now let me just say this, and we have to look at international best practices. Now most of us who travel would know that Florida have a lot of these lakes around their communities. But every time there's a hurricane coming, the people rush to these lakes and they trench them so that the lakes can absorb the extra water that they anticipate from the hurricane and so on. So they don't have the kind of widespread flooding that they would anticipate from a hurricane. We know that the catchment basin on South Key works because it worked for 10 years. So what is it? So why it is that we can't just dig it up and you know, dredge it and make sure that it's deep and clean and it could take the extra water and make sure it's fenced properly so people don't go into that area? You know, it's right there. It's there for people to see. It's overgrown now. It's all bushes, and people have been dumping garbage and all kind of stuff in that, so that it serves no purpose. And that's what I'm talking about when we talk about government that's organized, that's structured, that's well planned. That's what you need, not chaos. So you deal with the water situation, but you have another very, very serious situation. What happens in a natural disaster that's not flooding? How do you get out of the city? And
precisely, Mr. Alvarez. And again, let's take a look at the example, going back to your very first point in regards to the routes that are available. Given that it is a capital city, the traffic that you see, the bottlenecks to get into the capital city from all routes, let alone getting out of the capital city, it's beyond just disasters such as flooding. For instance, when there was the prison break incident, when there are instances of riots taking place at all entrance and exit points to the capital city, there is not even, it seems to be, a national security plan involved. The police themselves are not equipped or very much serviced to deal with the situation. For example, going back to last week, Wednesday night, the TTPS says, contrary to public belief, they were actually out trying to guide traffic. But when the numbers were shared with the public, it was only 9 officers that were posted to Charlotte Street.
You see, it comes back to the point I was making, that you have to do advanced planning. You must. It is a prerequisite, and you know, Keaton, I'm so glad that you brought this topic up this morning, because we are facing a time of uncertainty. And the world, you look around the whole world and you see it's a time of uncertainty. And I don't know how, one of the most frustrating feeling you can ever feel is that there's an emergency and you have to get out of the city and you have to sit in your car for 2 hours. And the thing about it is that there are solutions. You have to, and I've made this very clear, you know, I've spoken about this before. And I said that you have to make Rice Road and Tragridge Road. You have 3 main areas on the western side, which is Rice Road, Tragridge Road, and Arapita Avenue. 2 out of those 3 must be one-way going in one direction. And then on the other hand, you have Piccadilly Street and the Lady Young Road. And on that end, you must make those 2 one-way. And you have to determine, you move people to the west and people to the east. And then you have to get the Eastern Main Road and the Priority Bus Route going in one direction. So the way I see it is that the Eastern Main Road and the Priority Bus Route must be going east, and you must have the Beetham Highway and Rice Road, all of that, one route going west. So people can get from east to west, and people can get out of the city from west to east. But it has to be, it has to be very clear to people, not only to the public, but clear to the police as well, clear to the firemen, clear to the ambulance drivers, so that people, there must be a plan. And you see, because of international requirements, the airport has these emergency plans, and they do, I think, a mock-up on what we'll do if we had a disaster and so on. That is just international planning. And you have to do that with regards to Trinidad and Tobago. There must be evacuation routes. They have to be marked that way. But more than that, they have to be published in the newspaper. They have to be run on television and so on. But it speaks to a sort of a lackadaisical attitude that we have to most of the things to do with natural disasters and emergencies. We wait until it happens. It's funny that I monitor the weather a lot, and I would say to my friends, okay, they're gonna be heavy rain coming, and they say, but they have no alert, they have nothing. And then when the rain comes, you see a yellow alert, and then sometimes the yellow alert is so late that you have a yellow alert when there's no more rain.
A yellow alert usually happens, Mr. Alvarez, when half the system has already passed.
Exactly, exactly. So by the time you get your yellow alert, the rain is gone already. So I'm saying that we have to work on disaster management. There's more than that, and as I said, I'm glad you brought that up. Because you also have the situation where if you ask the average person in Trinidad and Tobago, so in the event of a hurricane or so on, where do I go to my emergency shelter? And some of them people say, oh no, they have it's kind of more like a sort of word of mouth thing. No, that school down the road is an emergency shelter, no. But we should have very clearly marked emergency shelters. We should always ensure, I don't know who's I think the ODPM should be doing that at all of the emergency shelters at all times, that they have water, that they have food stuff, canned stuff, and so on, that they have
Mr. Alvarez, you yourself are aware of the situation, because there is a Ministry of Planning and Development. I'm still not entirely sure what their responsibilities are. I don't know what the Ministry of Planning and Development does, but to me it sounds as though they also have to play a very active role in this. Now, it's unfortunate that the arteries, be the exitways and the entrances to the capital city, are so limited given the congestion of cars and people on a daily basis. But beyond that, for a moment, in the event of any national disaster, our planning has been limited due to fortunes. It's not often, it's quite rare that a hurricane will pass over Trinidad and Tobago. I think the last instance was a hurricane passing between Trinidad and Tobago at the very last minute, or a storm of that nature. And so it's us just praying, saying God is a Trini. But you're also aware that the nation is addressed, and our shelters are schools, the same schools which are facing serious infrastructural challenges, the same schools which have been argued are not safe for the occupancy of students. I'm not sure if they should even be deemed as shelters in the instance of a hurricane, Mr. Alvarez. So your points are very valid. The issue is that are those in authority just letting it go by because history has favored us, fortune has favored us? Is it a matter of it's not our priority, we don't care until it happens? That is the situation that we're dealing with. But a question I wanted to ask you is that because you focus a lot on the routes, because you focus a lot on planning, the maintenance and management of our road networks in and around the capital, that has also failed. Is that also a major contributing factor, such as the big potholes and ditches, as minor as it may sound, to the flow, to the ease of traffic, even in the event of a disaster?
Well, Keaton, let me tell you, it all stems to how your management is structured. One of a critical point you just made is that we have lived in Trinidad and Tobago with the feeling that God is a Trini. But we've also had experiences where heavy rain have destroyed people's homes and cars and so on. And we all, I remember there was a really bad flood a few years ago because I had to send my trucks with water and things to people in the communities and so on. These are just the tip of the iceberg of what can happen now with global warming and so on. And thank God WSN and yourself are bringing some sort of awareness to this problem. But the government does not care. I'll give you an example. The minister was recently talking, and the WASA official, sorry, I don't think the minister was on that press conference, but the WASA came out and said, listen, we have a problem with water supply at the Hollis Reservoir. and we may have to adjust our usage of water and so on. But I've been saying on social media that for 6 weeks now, that on Panker Street in St. James, there are two huge leaks. They're not just like little three-quarter pipes spraying water. There are two huge leaks that have been pouring water into that drain there for 6 weeks. And WhatsApp must be aware of it. And when I spoke about that, people laugh and say, well, boy, I could tell you one on my street, or I could tell you one up the hill, and I could tell you so on and so on. And the reason I'm bringing it up is to tell you that the management of our infrastructure has been so politicized, because you see what the government wants to do is to come before a general election and pave the road and fix the infrastructure, and so that people can say, wow, they're performing. But that's not how you maintain roads and bridges and water leaks and so on. That is all done locally. So if we go back, and that's why I like talking to people like yourself, Keaton, because you're young and you don't know what existed before. But in every community before, there was a WASA department. And the people in the area knew who, it was actually CWD, Central Water Distribution Authority, before there was WASA. And the people knew the managers, and they knew the people on the trucks, and they were on patrol all the time, every day, and they maintained that. In the communities is where they maintain the roads. So that if there is a pothole, the people in the community will do that. It's still done that way in every developed country in the world. You don't have this. Could you imagine in the United States of America that the president or Congress decided, oh, I want you all to go and fix a pothole down in Fort Lauderdale in Florida, or up in South Orange in New Jersey, or somewhere in California? So it's just impossible. So that is why we talk about structured management, where the communities know what they have to do. And that's how you communicate with your people, and that's how the people get a sense of feeling. And that also aids in your security as well, because then they know the policemen, they know the people on patrol, and so on. So we have to restructure Trinidad and Tobago into communities and take it away from the central government that is failing. Because I am sure that if the people of South Key and their businessmen, I know of a lot of businesses in the South Key area that know that, oh my God, if it rains for half an hour, I can't come out my parking lot.
If it's even half an hour that is required.
Yes, and they know that all you need to do is to clean up the catchment basin there. So there are many things. There's a pump on South Key, two pumps that they were actually put to pump water, and so I don't think they ever worked. Again, the engineers come up with the idea, and then somebody say, well, somebody stole the cable and somebody stole the pump at one time. I think they stole the entire pump at one time. But you don't put infrastructure in place, and you don't without the adequate security and so on.
Mr. Alvarez, let me ask you a question in regards to the role of public transportation in this plan as well. We are aware of instances where Citygate is, sometimes people have to swim in order to meet their maxi taxi. That being the case, though, what is the role of a public transportation system in a disaster management or evacuation plan for the city of Port of Spain? In all instances, there shouldn't be a separate plan for national security and a separate plan for the Ministry of Works and Transport dependent on the disaster. And as far as I'm concerned, it takes collaboration amongst the Port of Spain City Corporation, amongst OSHA, amongst the ministries, ODPM. All these are to be involved. So what about public transportation?
Well, Keaton, our public transportation service has been a mess for the longest while. Actually, it's been a mess when we took it over. As we got independence and move on and so on. But before that, buses ran on time. But not only did they run on time, there were people that actually walked from the public service, the public transport. There were people inspectors that actually boarded the buses at different places along the route to make sure the bus was on time and so on. And everybody knew what time the bus was coming and where the bus was going. Now, there's a public transport service in Trinidad and Tobago, and nobody can tell you for sure what bus is going where at what time. So that whole public transport service is in a mess, and it's very simple to fix because at every bus stop we can have bus. You should have on the bus stop what time the bus is arriving, and what number bus to look for, and the bus routes and the bus routes. I mean, come on, the bus routes are when you go into any big city, you can just stand up in the thing and look at. There's a map saying bus 6 goes this way, bus 7 goes this way, bus 8 goes that way, and those are things that we don't have to imagine what to do because all we have to use is international best practices. But we see, I was telling a friend yesterday, we travel to places like, I was just saying to him, I said, we go to a place like Paris and London, and we look at these old buildings and say, wow, and we're amazed. But we allow our the last 2 hanging bridges we have in Trinidad to fall apart. We have the only satellite dish the first satellite dish that was able to allow intercontinental communications across the Atlantic, and we're allowing the whole thing to rot and fall apart and so on. So we really in a mess in terms of our management of our country. And you speak to something now that can affect the lives of hundreds and thousands of people in our cities. Not only Trinidad, not only Port of Spain, but what is the evacuation plan for San Fernando? We don't know. You see,
Exactly. Yes.
So you're talking about that things that can lead to serious disasters, and I was amazed when you were saying to me that in contacting the police service and the other emergency services, they're saying, we can't get the minister. That sort of central control of our country is a mess. And the minister said, well, I did not open the bus route until so and so because the plan was so and so. So we need more than finding the minister. We need to know this is the plan.
Well, Mr. Alvarez, as we've concluded this particular conversation, and I thank you very much for your time, I will say that at least one issue has been resolved. You've spoken about water catchment. Well, there's no need to worry about that. Port of Spain has proven to be a water catchment area after just 5 minutes of rain. So maybe we can't complain about that, sir.
Well, it just tells us very, very much so that there's a need for maintenance, cleaning our waterways on a regular basis. There's a need for planning, very, very important. That's because none of us, I don't know it, you're in media, so you don't know what the plan is. The police don't know what the plan is.
I don't think the minister knows what the plan is.
So there's need for a plan, there's need for structure. But it tells us that we as a country have to stop for a moment, look beyond all the politics and who's better and who, and Indian and African and ketchup and mustard and all that. Look at where we are as a country and say, listen, we have to manage this place properly, and it's not being done properly. And we have to start in our communities and make sure every community is safe, every community has water supply, every community has proper drainage. And if we can't do it on this big magnanimous approach, we have to do it community by community, and that has to be how we restructure local government. So when I talk about restructuring local government and the way we manage our country, it has to go to international best practices, and that is with disaster management. And I am so glad that you brought disaster management up, because perhaps what people don't recognize is that the big one, whatever that big disaster is, hasn't happened yet, and we are unprepared.
Certainly, Mr. Alvarez. Thank you very much, sir, for your time this morning. It's been a pleasure to have this conversation once more. As I've always said, I always appreciate when individuals come on the program and put forward solutions to the table rather than just add to the tension. There's always a need for some sort of direction. So thank you very much, sir, for your time this morning. It's been a pleasure.
Thank you, Keaton. Thank you, WSN. Thank you, Trinidad and Tobago, for being able to talk to you again.
Have a good day. Ladies and gentlemen, Mr. Alvarez is right. I mean, it's an all-round effort in terms of planning. It has to be focused on communities as well, but it's just beyond Port of Spain. What about a disaster evacuation plan for the city of San Fernando? What about Remo, Point Fortin? These are just major hubs, but generally beyond that, across Trinidad and Tobago, are even local government councils prepared beyond just you can come and collect your sandbags from us. Let's take a break on the program, ladies and gentlemen.
FanZone, your reliable, authentic supplier, has just gotten better. You can now visit our website www.fanzonett.com for your authentic wear and collectibles. The only place where you can use both your Visa debit and credit cards. Visit our website fanzonett.com to make your purchase today.
If these walls could talk, they'd cry uncle. They didn't plan to become offices or yoga studios. But they've stood by us, even when we got a little stir-crazy. For that, they deserve some thanks. They deserve Benjamin Moore.
Join me, Dr. Nalini Kokram, on What's Up Doc, where we discuss all your burning questions concerning health.
Trinidad and Tobago is among one of the highest risk group of patients that develop this form of genetic breast cancer.
What I'd like to take home from a short interview like this, screening. You must screen.
Because it's silent.
It's silent.
Yeah.
And because it's silent, you don't know it's there.
What's Up Doc, every Tuesday and Thursday on WESN, Content Capital.
My name is Carl Media, and I'm the founder and the host of Ever Increasing Voice Ministries. Join me every Saturday and Sunday on WESN, this powerful station, at 9 a.m. on Saturdays, 1 p.m. and 7 p.m. nightly. Also on Sundays, I'll be on at 7 a.m., 1 p.m. and 7 p.m. at night time. When you come here, we are getting people heavenly ready.
The newest book is here, Closer to the Church, the debut novel by author and former Mayor Louis Lee Singh. Available at all the Home Store branches, Barataria, West Mall, Shogunas and C3 San Fernando. Paper-based bookshop 10 Nook Avenue, St. Anne's, WESN 30A Gattaca Street, Woodbrook. Metropolitan Bookshop, Ariapita Avenue, Woodbrook, and all RIK bookstores nationwide. Available online as paperback on Amazon.com and Kindle for e-readers. For more info, call 628-5835 or 389-6504. Also available from author Louis Lee Singh, I Used to Live in Heaven, Letters to My Granddaughters, and Local Government in Trinidad, Conspiracy Against the People.
Welcome back to the program, ladies and gentlemen. Emmanuel Joseph, 22 years of age, was being held in remand following charges against him in relation to the attempted murder of a prison officer and the daughter of a deputy prisons commissioner. However, he died at prison last week, Friday, after complaining about chest pains. In a statement, the prison service confirmed he was taken to the Arima Health Facility as a result of the complications, and he was attended to but subsequently pronounced dead by the attending physician. Now, this has led to a flurry of theories on social media, of course. There are those who are questioning once more the ability of our national security services to carry out the rule of law. But beyond that, there are those who are also saying it's a positive, whilst there are those that are also suggesting, listen, we've got to apply what is just and what is right. There needs to be serious transparency in this investigation. And one such individual is Ms. Denise Pitcher. She's the Executive Director for the Caribbean Center for Human Rights. She's with us via Zoom. Hello, Ms. Pitcher, welcome to the program.
Good morning, and thank you for having us.
Thank you very much for joining me this morning. One newspaper article has suggested that you've described the death of Emmanuel Joseph as unusual and alarming. Do you care to clarify such comments?
So it's unusual because he's 22 years old, and claims have been made that he may have died of a heart attack. But just the sudden death of a 22-year-old is unusual and also alarming, given that, you know, he was in the custody of the not protective services, but in the custody of the state for charges of a crime committed against state officials.
Mm-hmm. Now, you've also called for transparency into any investigation, but as we are well aware of, the Trinidad and Tobago Police Service, let alone the prison service, will remain very much silent, using that any issuance or any statements made while an investigation is ongoing can actually compromise the prosecution or the defense. That being said, exactly where or how should transparency even come about?
So, I mean, there seems to be two ongoing investigations, right? The police is conducting an investigation, and then also there's an internal investigation. However, another layer of transparency would be satisfied if there was a coroner's inquest, and that could be initiated, you know, by anyone to investigate the death, this unusual occurrence of this young man.
A coroner's report, if such a report is publicized, and there are instances in the past where reports have been publicized, given the level of the investigation or the murder at hand or the death at hand, whatever it may be, there have been reports that are publicized. Who do you expect to carry out such an investigation then? The same individuals who are a part of the ongoing investigation, the same police officers whom we say it's rather unusual or alarming, the same prisons officers, who then should be responsible for an investigation?
So, you know, the magistrate could you know, initiate an investigation, or you know, and then also this investigation, you know, it could be triggered, you know, by members of his family, but generally it should be initiated by the magistrate.
You've also raised an issue. You are quoted as saying, until we know the cause of death, we will have fears because of what he was arrested for and charged with. It is concerning that you are placing him in remand in a situation where he's being held by prison officers. He was allegedly responsible for threats against the Deputy Prisons Commissioner. But as far as I'm aware, whilst I understand what you're suggesting about being surrounded by prisons officers, he was treated, at least from what we are aware thus far, being placed in remand is a similar treatment many others will face once charged. Why is this different?
So yes, of course, you know, through the natural course of justice, he should be placed in remand. However, given that the allegations and charges are made against him for, you know, crimes committed against prison officials, there should have, you know, in this matter, probably been an extra layer of security. Maybe he should have been placed in a special cell where he was monitored more closely, so that again, it go back to transparency. Simply, you know, like in remand in the prison system, there is an inherent imbalance of power, because of course prison officers are responsible for taking care of persons in remand in prisons, and there's not a lot of monitoring that goes on inside the prisons. It's very much shielded and shielded from the public in terms of accountability and transparency. And so in this specific case, because because the crimes are committed against prisons officials, there is that concern that there could be some, we're saying, that we still don't know for sure what happened to him, but, that there could be a greater risk to his security as a consequence of being placed in the possession of persons or of the system that, he committed a crime against.
Where then should he have been placed?
So as I said, maybe he should have been placed, in an individual cell, by himself and just more closely monitored. Maybe also even the police should have, been monitoring him more closely, just because of this specific, this specific incident.
Well, according to
ensure that there's no, sorry?
According to Prisons Commissioner Diopasad Ramata, Joseph was the lone prisoner in his cell. He was the lone individual occupying his cell.
So, as we know, with remand, I don't know of any instance of a remandee being placed in a cell by himself, because usually what we know about remand are that they share the space with at least six persons. So again, but because we have to go based on his word, but unless it's an investigation, unless a report is produced, unless there's greater scrutiny, the involvement of say the inspector of prisons in terms of if in fact he was held by himself, we're just going based on the account of one person, and we need to, if there's to be greater transparency and greater accountability, we need some sort of investigation.
Are you suggesting that there is a lack of confidence or trust within the national security apparatus? I'm not talking about the ministry itself, I'm talking about the services such as the TTPS and the prison service.
I guess yes, I mean, in terms of, what's happened in the past, we've had instances of extrajudicial killings. We've had instances of persons who have been charged with crimes, who have died, in the custody of the protective services. So yes, there are questions to be asked, concerns to be raised around his death, and because of history and other instances, yes, there is some concern about whether we can trust what has happened to this man, the circumstances of what has happened to this man.
I'm very much in agreement with you in regards to the application of the rule of law. I'm also in agreement with you in regards to transparency and continuous scrutiny of our prison services. You've raised very valuable points, and points that one cannot deny are very much key to any sort of progress or push forward. But for every question that you've raised, answers have been given. Now, the other side of it is that there are those within the public sphere, such as the family of the deceased, who have called for transparency, who says they don't trust the system, and that they want to know exactly what took place or why did he die. Same thing as you said, 22 years of age, seems to have no medical conditions or complications prior to him being remanded and charged. But what about the instance of him having been taken to the Arima Health facility and the physician attending to him pronounced him dead? There have been any indications that there were anything beyond that.
So they have not produced the autopsy results, so we still don't know for certain what cause he died of. So we're all awaiting the autopsy result, which would indicate cause of death. But as I said, in the past, we've had instances of persons dying in the custody of the protective services, and that's why a coroner's inquest would go a greater distance in terms of ensuring transparency and accountability. And it's important to have this transparency and accountability. I mean, there's been a lot of emotions, there's been a lot of commentary around this particular incident on social media, and justifiably, the public, they are very, very, they're very emotional, and they're, emotional, fears are high because of the, the incredible levels of crime that we're facing. However, we have to always insist that the rule of law is maintained for every single person, and everyone is entitled to equality of treatment before the law. Because if we as a society and if we as a nation condone the erosion of the rule of law, it will seep into other areas, and other institutions where other injustices will occur, and the rule of law and ensuring that everyone is treated equally before the law is important to protect everyone.
Ms. Pitcher, if I may just interrupt you, there will be those this morning who would say the rule of law, when applied, has not even worked for the general population of Trinidad and Tobago. The rule of law is a complete waste of time. The rule of law is just a fancy term which benefits others, such as attorneys at law. Nothing against them. But you have to understand, this is what the public is expressing, given their frustrations, of which you yourself agree are legitimate.
I don't think the rule of law just benefits the attorneys, it benefits everyone. And the thing about it, yes, we have a justice system that is not perfect, by no means perfect. And that is why, the onus is on every single individual in Trinidad and Tobago to insist, in our daily lives that, and to insist that the rule of law is upheld, to not just say, well, okay, this young man died in prison, okay, there's one less criminal on the streets, and then we just kind of, let that fall by the wayside, because then that enables a culture and a system whereby there's further erosion of the rule of law, and it then affects us. So we need to insist that there's a proper investigation, that there is transparency, and that there is accountability in this young man's death. Even persons charged and convicted of crimes are also entitled to their fundamental human rights. They're also entitled to due process under the Constitution. And we must insist on, these justice system working. It's not perfect, but we must continue to insist. If each and every single one of us, cumulatively continue to insist on the justice system working and upholding the rule of law, we will have incremental improvements. But if we continue to be apathetic, and if we continue to just stay silent in the face of injustices, it will continue and it will get worse.
Ms. Pitcher, I will ask you, as the Executive Director for the Caribbean Center for Human Rights, how do you respond to the average man on the street this morning who is saying, but criminals do not even respect my human rights? Criminals do not understand human rights. Criminals simply do not care. They don't even, applicate the rule of law. Why should it even apply to them? Again, I understand what you're saying. I agree with a lot of what you're saying. But the man on the street is going to say, listen, they don't care about my human rights. Why should I care about it? And perhaps this is why there seems to be support in instances for extrajudicial killings. Not that by any means it is a good thing.
So that's also legitimate, and we empathize with the public. But the buck stops with the state, and the buck stops with the justice system, and the buck stops with law enforcement. They are the ones entrusted to uphold the rule of law and to enforce the law. And we need to insist that all of these state institutions engage in a transparent investigation, so that we can satisfy that the rule of law is upheld. Because yes, criminals may not respect, the public may feel that their human rights are being infringed on, but the state is responsible for protecting everyone's human rights. So that is why it's important, you know, that we have a proper investigation, that the rule of law is upheld, that we continue to insist on the rule of law. You know, the accountability lies with the state. Hence the reason that we need to continue to insist that there's a proper investigation, because it protects everyone.
My final question too, because I am out of time, I'm overextending myself, but does the center itself plan to remain very much vigilant on this investigation, and they themselves plan to keep an eye on the situation and raise points as they go along?
Yes, absolutely. We will continue to monitor the situation. We await the autopsy results. We are supposed to submit a report to the UN body on the Convention of Torture. And in the event that this, you know, the investigation produces, you know, a result that, you know, is you know, that infers that, you know, there were questionable circumstances around this young man's death, you know, that will also form part of our report. And we need to continue to insist that there's transparency and there's accountability by state institutions in these instances, because it affects everyone. We cannot condone any instance of human rights violation.
Ms. Pitcher, thank you very much for your time this morning. It's always a pleasure to have the conversation with you, and all the very best to you and to the rest of the team at the Centre.
Thank you for having me.
Do have a good day. Ms. Denise Pitcher, the Executive Director of the Caribbean Centre for Human Rights, joining me this morning. Well, the application of the rule of law. The rule of law applies to everyone, but is it working for everyone? And the support of extrajudicial killings. Well, there are those who have had question marks surrounding it, raising legitimate concerns, but there are also those who have legitimate concerns of an ever-escalating crime situation here in TNT, and have issued their support for the eradication of criminals before they even reach remand. That's a situation that we're in, and need I say, it's a very complicated but dangerous situation we find ourselves in as citizens of TNT. Let's take a break on the program.
Here is WESN News on the Hour. I am Sierra Ali. Thanks for joining us. Here are the headlines. Caribbean Airlines expands flights for Tobago's second carnival. U.S. Ambassador present ambulance and field hospital to Tobago. Zoological Society to discuss court suggestion of Queen's Park Savannah as an environmentally sensitive area. And internationally, Japan's court says trans sterilization requirement unconstitutional. Now for the details. Caribbean Airlines Limited has expanded its flight services between the islands in anticipation for Tobago's second carnival. According to a statement released on Wednesday, the airline not only maintained its core capacity, but also introduced 42 additional flights running from October 18th to 31st. These supplementary flights collectively provide an extra 4,144 seats to accommodate the increased demand during the carnival period. As per Carl's announcement, the CEO of the airline, Garvin Madera, expressed his satisfaction, stating, Caribbean Airlines is delighted to serve as the official airline for Tobago Carnival and looks forward to welcoming both local and international visitors to the island. U.S. Ambassador Candace Bond and U.S. Southern Command Military Deputy Commander Vice Admiral Alvin Halsey present ambulance and field hospital to Tobago Emergency Management Agency. In a generous gesture of international cooperation, U.S. Ambassador Candace Bond and U.S. Southern Command Military Deputy Commander Vice Admiral Alvin Halsey participated in the donation of an ambulance and a field hospital to Tobago Emergency Management Agency. This significant handover event occurred at the Shaw Park complex in Scarborough on Tuesday. The Zoological Society has scheduled a meeting for Wednesday to deliberate on the recent court appeal decision. In this ruling, the judges have made recommendations proposing the designation of the Queen's Park Savannah as an environmentally sensitive area. This decision comes after the court supported an appeal lodged by the Environmental Management Authority against a judicial review ruling issued by Justice Margaret Mohammed. The review was in response to a claim filed by the FET promoter Wild Goose Limited against both the EMA and Senior Superintendent Garth Nelson. Internationally, Japan's Supreme Court has ruled that it is unconstitutional to require citizens to be sterilized before they can officially change genders. The 2004 law said people could only change their gender if they have no reproductive capacity. Wednesday's ruling came after a transgender woman filed a petition challenging the law. Rights group Human Rights Watch had called the law abusive and outdated. Well, that's news to the hour on WESN. I am Sierra Ali. Thanks for watching.
Since they were on sale, Laura bought these umbrella shoes without thinking. Literally, without thinking. Hungry for deals? You'd better come and satisfy it at KFC before doing something crazy. Wow Bucket, 7 pieces of chicken and 4 regular sides for $115. A finger-licking good deal.
Welcome back to the program, ladies and gentlemen. Thank you for making the time to be with me today. I get into my final conversation. The war against crime. It's a topic that almost every talk show across Trinidad and Tobago speaks about on a daily basis. And I try not to always get too carried away or too emotionally involved in it. Well, but as a citizen who every day has to look behind his shoulders, in front of him, above him, below, everywhere, just to make sure that I can get to my car safely, well, it's obviously scary for all of us. But the war against crime, that term, that sentence alone, sometimes you wonder exactly who's at war or who's actually fighting the battles. Was the war against crime sometimes just a war of words amongst politicians? What about a culture of criminality in politics? Well, that is exactly the headline, the basis of the column by Professor Ramesh Dusaran on October 15th, and he's with me this morning to discuss just such. And I welcome to the program for the very first time, Professor Ramesh Dusaran. Hello, sir. Welcome to the program. Thank you so much for joining me.
Well, it's a pleasure, but it's also a responsibility to take part as a civilian in what the country seems to need now. And you have put your finger on one of the problems. You don't know who is fighting the war, because the people who are supposed to fight against criminality, you find inside that realm there are potholes of irresponsibility and even some elements of corruption. So the war is both external and internal, because you have a culture of criminality across the country now, and it has been fomented for many years now. And there seems to be now, as many citizens have been complaining both in and out of Parliament, they seem we are on a slippery slope, and we need certain hands on deck to help stop it. I say certain hands because everybody can't deal with crime. Victims themselves are suffering. You can't ask them to deal with crime. You have a constitution and you have people responsible and paid. People are paid to fight against crime. Citizens are volunteers, they may or may not help, but we have to call upon the people who are paid and who have the public trust. And through the election process, they are elected to serve a constitutional purpose. The Constitution states that the parliament and the politicians are responsible for the public safety of the citizens. They are responsible for having good government. So that is where the war should begin. And the citizens expect the outcomes to be commensurate with what the Constitution expects. Nothing personal here. It's a matter of policy and getting the system ready to deal with this scourge of criminality across the country. I did allude to a culture of criminality because when you use the word culture, it means the habits, the bad habits. There could be good habits too, but we are speaking about bad habits, crime, public safety. The bad habits get so embedded, they get so rooted in the society that you form parallel values. You have criminal values now. As I listed 10 in the column you referred to, the criminals have no fear of prisons. They have no respect for property. But they feel heroic by having guns and ammunition. And I listed 10 of them.
You did list 10 of them indeed, Professor, but you've also made, and I'm glad that you've clarified exactly what the terminology culture of criminality is. But before I get any further, what is the relationship between a culture of criminality and politics, particularly in Trinidad and Tobago?
That's a very, not only interesting question, it really puts us into the heat of things, as it were, because crime has a lot to do with politics. The politics of crime. I hear people saying, well, don't politicize crime. It is bad to politicize crime. The fact, my dear people, crime has to be political, because crime, what we're having now, the home invasions, I mean, it is tragic. The most recent example we have, after the traumatic experience of a home invasion, criminals entering the home, breaking into the home, one of the victims, an old lady, she died soon after in the hospital. How more tragic can you get? Crime is political because it offends the Constitution. Crime is political because it offends the citizen's right of privacy. It offends the Constitution because it offends people's right for free movement, and so on. So crime is political. It gets even more political when the politicians, as I just said, who are responsible for dealing with crime, seemingly fail to do so, and continuing failing to do so, most tragically by mounting a series of excuses for not doing a job that they are paid to do. And it is cultural as well, because it comes across seemingly from one government to the next. So it becomes cultural. It is not something that happens yesterday or today. It is embedded. That's the way politicians have been behaving and continue to behave. And what is the solution to that?
Well, Professor, when we examine crime in Trinidad and Tobago, even from the politician's point of view, it would seem as though it is wholly based off of statistics, whether it be the murder rate or a so-called reduction in serious crimes such as larceny and home invasions that we are often shared to. But have you ever seen any efforts to examine the culture of criminality in the context that we're not only looking at statistics, but we're looking at criminology, we're examining psychology as well as sociology?
That's the point I made, and I have always been making. That's why I am more favored to call myself a social science activist, fighting for public justice, making public statements, and facing the risks that go with such interventions in this small multicultural society. Now, it is much more than that, you know. You have a political party system, and it is largely based on racial allegiance. And it is difficult to get the kind of consensus we need to fight criminals. Because, for example, you have a question of political patronage, where people are financed, and more precisely, you have gangs getting contracts. So the system is contaminated in this way. It is contaminated because of the culture of criminality which has been embedded now in the society. Mm-hmm. Now the figures, I say I'm a social scientist because you need the services of psychology. That is, you need to find out why these criminals commit the kind of crimes that they do. The question why is a psychological question because it has to do with the motive. What is the motive that drives you to go in at home, invade it, beat up people, and even kill them? What is the motive? And I listed 10 elements of the culture. But I mean, this is a society that doesn't read. Mm-hmm. They don't read. I mean, you have read it because you're in the media. But which teacher will read these elements to say, well, let us deal with it?
Professor.
I made a very important, no, I'm not only talking about proposing. I proposed a program at the end of that column, a social justice program for late primary and early secondary school students. Mm-hmm. I wouldn't elaborate now because we are on a radio show, we don't have enough time. But I put forward a proposal to teach these children, explain to them the nature of certain crimes, larceny, robbery, murder, and so on, crimes that are committed by young people mainly. If you understand the nature of the crime, and you must teach them the punishment of these crimes, so it will create a preventive module in their minds very early. Don't wait till they commit the crime and let them find out what the prison is, what the courthouse is. They should be explained what these institutions are and the nature of these crimes and the punishment.
So, Professor, what you
mind against the culture of criminality.
What you are advocating for is essentially that everyone should get in touch with reality, even as part of this social justice system that you're referring to. It's a matter of opening the eyes of the young people to the reality of what it is like should you commit offenses. And that leads me to my next point. If I take a look at what the Minister for Local Government has indicated about negative news, if I were to refer to the apology by the Honourable Minister of National Security, Fitzgerald Hines, giving his assurance that the government and national security will continue to put up walls to protect citizens. It's not even a matter of putting up walls anymore. If we were to speak about reality, the rhetoric coming from politicians, are they completely out of touch with the reality of the situation? And that in itself does not allow them to be the most suited to deal with the situation, or is it just simply choosing to ignore a situation?
There are two levels to the answer. One is that they are in touch with the reality. They know they can behave however they want, and they will have their political support. We have seen that in the last local government elections. You had potholes, you had crimes, you had all different things that make the country weak, deficient. And yet, look at the result. When we come into another election, so the politicians know they have basic support, a large amount of support, regardless of what they do. We know that. And then we come, well, in the marginals, we decide, and so on and so on and so on. The second level is that, yes, they are not in touch with the real suffering of people, the hardships through traffic, food prices, crime, potholes, every single element that makes a democracy healthy is missing in this country now. And that's why I earlier said we have to stop this slippery slope. Because we don't want to say, well, we will be like Haiti and so on, so on, so on, so on. This is not pessimism. This reflects the question you are asking. Are they in touch with reality? The answer is no. Mm-hmm. And they don't, and they're reluctant to deal with it. Because if they deal with some of the realities, they will have to tackle some of the places that they get votes from. And that is what makes the system so corruptible.
That's a very interesting point, and it goes back to what you're saying about the elements of a healthy democracy. So if there is this level of reluctancy, even if we were to say it interferes with our voting base, for example, then what would, and even the war of words in parliaments, the constant war of words in parliaments, then what would that suggest for any meeting between political opponents, them coming together to discuss crime here in Trinidad and Tobago?
No, I am happy to accept your invitation to be on this show. But sometimes, like many others, I'm quite sure, we reflect and we ask the question, what is the value of our intervention? Mm-hmm. We have no party card. We don't aspire to be a minister or anything. We are having a civic responsibility to share our knowledge, which we have accumulated over years of training and experience and publication and research. But where is this going? Nowhere. What do you notice in the budget debate as you speak to the politicians in parliament and so on? Everybody wants to start fresh. Square one. Everything, if you listen to the debate in terms of proposal for crime, precisely, there are other areas like education and health. But speaking about crime precisely, every suggestion made by politicians in the parliament in the budget, that suggestion has been made before. And made before properly in terms of proposals, analysis, and given to government, one after the other. If you make a check as a media person, how many reports on dealing with crime has been submitted to government in the last 20, 25 years? Mm-hmm. You will have to have a big van to carry them because there will be so many. So many. So what is the issue of having this debate in Parliament? Mm-hmm. The budget was presented by Mr. Imber quite forcefully, figures, statistics. And in the end, what happened? Not one comma has been changed after 2 weeks of debate, 1 week in the lower house, another week in the upper house. Talk, talk, talk. Nothing has changed in that budget speech. Mm-hmm. No number. You give 400 million, you say, for agriculture. What that will do when your import food bill is about $7 billion, that can make a dent. Look, just yesterday I read that Guyana is opening 500 acres to grow coconut, and they started. We have coconut fields stretched from Manzalita to Ceres, Cedros, drying up, neglected. We had a coconut industry by making mattresses, fibers. So there is that aspect to it. That is, we lack a strong spirit of entrepreneurship, of development.
Professor Duasran, if I may interject, you've described yourself as in a way, as a social science activist, and you have even referenced the accumulation of reports. You've had very many conversations, you've authored many reports, you've authored articles, you've authored columns, papers. Yes, and I very much understand that, but do you feel and I may be asking a rhetorical question here based off of your previous responses, but do you feel as though the reception by those who have the capacity, the knowledge, the expertise, the research, such as an individual like yourself, is not welcomed by those who can put it in place and effect it?
I do, like I say, I don't want to push forward myself in isolation. There are many other people who have done work in different areas, and I've seen their proposals dumped in the wastepaper basket. And this is where I also, with respect to, bring the media into the issue. Why is the media sort of, they have us suffering from amnesia? They don't have an archive to go and see what these reports are and write about it and press the government. That is part of the media role too. You call me to speak, but I'm quite sure after I speak, you will forget everything I say. And it will be right there. Everybody started back from, this is a square one society. This is a square one society. If you listen to the debate, I wouldn't call names, but the same thing has been said over and over. So we are on a merry-go-round society. We have merry-go-round politics. And the headlines come. The same thing was said in the newspaper last month. It's the same headline they're using again.
You see, what's so ironic, Professor, and the thing is, I'm not in print media. What's so ironic is that we're having this conversation this morning, and I'm in media, and yet I agree with you. I agree with you. I've been a critic of the media myself.
You see, no, it's just a good point to see the reality, because the media itself might not be facing reality like the politician. So what we should do is to pin down the people who have to be responsible for implementing this proposal, and the media has a direct role to play. And I think the publishers or whoever owns the media should provide the resources to do so. It is not only reporting, it is also analyzing and retrospecting what happened before. Otherwise, how else will you hold the politicians to account? They get away because everything they say makes a headline, you know. I don't make headlines. If a minister come tomorrow and say the same thing he said last year and last month, he will get a big headline.
Professor, you have
so we are fighting against a current. People like me are fighting against a current.
No, I understand what you're saying.
On page 5 and 6 about the minister says, even the same thing he said, he gets a big headline. So that is media politics.
But I agree with you, and some of my colleagues in the media will be very hurt or angry or upset with me, and might look at me differently after even I contribute to this conversation this morning. But what we've noticed is that now here, what media has become is not even a matter of doing some level of investigation, not even looking at the historical context, not trying to educate the public. Media has become associated with what headline sells. That is what media has become associated with. And therefore, if we are speaking of a culture of criminality and every aspect of society, including people playing their role, then guess what? That in itself is going to be very difficult to change. Media has become so commercialized that as you said, following a conversation like this and following your contribution this morning, are there going to be any further reports about this? Is any other media house wanting to say, you know what, we need to go and take a look back at over the last 25 years? No. So I very much agree with you what you're saying. It's a frustration of mine as well, and I'm in the media.
You see, we use the word investigative journalism. It doesn't have to mean you're going into a minister's house or you're looking at his bank account. That is one aspect of it. It's a very serious aspect. Investigative journalism is looking at the record, going into the record and have a political test of integrity. These politicians, do they have the integrity to live to their promises? Do they have the integrity and the credibility to implement what they had promised 10 years ago? That is investigative journalism. Mm-hmm. So it doesn't take much sweat. All the owners and publishers have to do is provide the resources, because you don't want to take one reporter and let him do everything You have to have your researchers, a research unit in every media house to provide the information necessary for critical retrospection and holding people responsible, accountable. That is what we need in this country too. So I can talk. I have been talking donkey years now. I have been writing a column since 1970 something, you know, when I came back from Canada, about 1980. I wrote in the Express, I wrote in the Guardian, I wrote now in Newsday, every Sunday. What is the effect of this? I have made more enemies than friends, perhaps, by writing.
Yes.
But it's a risk, and it is something that you have to live by your conscience.
Professor, I want to thank you very much for joining me, because I'm getting that buzz in my ear that we are out of time. But thank you very much, and I could very much appreciate how the conversation went, and even looking at it from an all-rounded aspect, and the role of media. So thank you so very much for your time, Professor. And need I say, I hope this is our first conversation, because I welcome many more to come. Hopefully where you don't feel as though you're repeating yourself from what has even taken place 20, 25 years ago. Thank you so much for your time, sir.
Thank you for having me, and morning to all your viewers, listeners.
Have a good day. Take care. Professor Ramesh Yusran joining me on AM Prime this morning, and he has raised a very, very valuable point. How is the media, or what is the media doing to ensure that it executes its role as the fourth estate, that it educates a population, makes them aware or understand, even from a historical context? Are media practitioners taking their time to actually do investigative journalism? And it doesn't even have to be a 2-page or 3-page report every Sunday. This is something that should be on an ongoing basis, as stressed by Professor Yusran. That in itself could help the situation. Because as much as we've spoken about a culture of criminality and politics, do not forget your responsibility and personal responsibility as a citizen of TNT. So once more, I thank Professor Yusran, and I thank all my guests for their time and contribution this morning to AM Prime. Ladies and gentlemen, it has been a pleasure. Wishing you a good day ahead, maybe a productive one and a safe one. I'm Keaton Shaw. This has been WESN Content Capital's AM Prime, and I'll see you again tomorrow morning. Take care.
Forced to close as fuel stockpiles run dry. Israel has imposed a fuel blockade on the enclave, saying it could be used by Hamas for military purposes, but fuel is needed to power generators used in hospitals and desalination plants in Gaza. Al Jazeera's chief correspondent in Gaza was broadcasting live images from the enclave last evening when he found out his immediate family, his wife, his son and daughter, had all been killed in an Israeli airstrike. The 53-year-old journalist has been the face of Palestinians during multiple wars, and his loss is likely to reverberate across the Arab world.
Throughout the day, Al Jazeera's Gaza bureau chief Wael al-Daddu was live on air reporting on the latest Israeli strikes, only to learn that one of those strikes killed his own family. He lost his wife, his 15-year-old son, his 7-year-old daughter and his grandson. Other loved ones, including another son and a granddaughter, were injured. More are missing under the rubble of their house in the Nusayrat camp in central Gaza.
A big tragedy, especially it's perpetrated against women and children. No more, no less than a calamity. Large numbers of people's houses bombarded. However, this is a custom of the Israeli occupation.
The Daddu family had been sheltering in Nusayrat after fleeing their home in northern Gaza. The camp is south of the Wadi Gaza line in the area Israel has told Palestinians to go for their own safety. While al-Daddu's colleagues were overcome with emotion as they reported live on the deaths of his family.
Thinking that there could be a safe place.
Take your time, Safwat.
They said Wael al-Dahdu, who has reported from Gaza for many years, was a pillar of journalism and his voice would go on. In a statement, Al Jazeera said it strongly condemned what it called Israel's indiscriminate targeting and killing of innocent civilians. Journalists have not been spared from the casualties in Gaza. The Committee to Protect Journalists says at least 24 reporters have been killed there since the beginning of the war, an unprecedented number.
We can now bring in Mustafa Tamazeh, spokesperson for Oxfam based in the West Bank. Thank you very much for joining us here on France 24 today. What are you hearing about the situation on the ground over in Gaza?
Thank you for having me. Well, the situation is actually collapsing. Everything in Gaza has collapsed. There is no any basic life, and things allow people to live there. If there is no water, there is no food, no electricity. Actually, people are starving. I've been calling my friends and colleagues there. They need food. They said there is no food, and the Israeli strikes, does not discriminate between anything. They've been hit, even food store, water pumps, bakeries. So everything in Gaza actually under attack. There's no electricity. There is no medicines. I think Gaza is not not a place suitable for life anymore, and that's why I think it's an urgent a need for the international leaders to take action to stop this crazy war ongoing there.
The death toll has come in from Gaza's health ministry and it stands at over 7,000. Over 7,000 people in Gaza have been killed since the 7th of October. Israel says that Hamas places itself in civilian populations. Is that it? Is that why this death toll is so high?
Well, this is what Israel said. We, as humanitarian workers, we want to work with people. Over 50% of those people were killed. They are kids or they are infants, like 1 year or less. Do you think those are Hamas? So the point here is like indiscriminate attack and like collective punishment and siege over all Gaza, not allowing for food, for water, for humanitarian workers, even to take, those people bodies under the rebels. We talk about over 7,000, but the numbers are even higher. So that's an argument. It's against humanity, against the human principles and the human, international human law. Indiscriminate attack for people everywhere. And even they ask the people to move from the north to the south. But as you reported, even Al Jazeera correspondent family were moved actually to the south. And we know friends and colleagues who moved to the south, but still they hit there. I don't think there's any justifications allows Israel and allows the international leaders, Europeans and American leaders, to give the green light to Israelis actually for this a collective punishment for Palestinians, 2.3 million civilians, 60% of the people who were killed, women and children. Nothing safe in Gaza, no place safe in Gaza. Even the UN agencies reported over 38 their workers were killed there. So no one safe in Gaza.
That's what the UN said earlier today as well, that no one is safe in Gaza. Today we have European leaders who are meeting. They're deciding whether they should be calling for a humanitarian ceasefire or a window. How frustrating is it to hear global powers debate on what to call it, that they haven't come out already and call for a ceasefire so people can get the aid they need?
I think the question now it's for those leaders and also for the humanity. Any people, any person who see us nowadays, we Palestinians here as a humanitarian worker, we ask, where is the humanity? We have been seeing live on TV collective killing, collective punishment, and what actions we are taking. I think it's a must for the European leaders to take a decision. We're calling for a ceasefire because the level of damage in Gaza needs months, if not years, to be able to do, to go to the kind of normal life. What's available now from the water in Gaza, it's only 2%. What's available in food, it's something like that. Like before the escalation is over 100 trucks per day used to enter Gaza, which is not a normal, by the way, but it's, you know, under the siege. Now we talk about like 60 trucks. It's like a drop in the ocean. So there is a need for the European leaders to take immediate decisions now, because the situation in Gaza now, it's a matter of life and death. So their decision will determine whether they need those civilians people to stay alive or they ask them to die, because those people who are not dying from the Israeli airstrikes, they will be die from starvation.
And let's not forget that there was a 13-day siege imposed by Israel just a couple of days ago. And one of the things Israel is not allowing in is fuel, because Israel says Hamas will be using this to power their rockets or what have you. But fuel is also needed for those desalination plants. It's also needed for those hospital generators. I mean, one after the other, hospitals are shutting down.
That's true. And here's the question again to the international leaders. I mean, if there should be something for, you know, the world actually to rely on, to go back to it, which is the international humanitarian laws, the international human rights laws, which does not allow, you know, even under the war, to do such collective punishment, to cut basic life like food and water and medicine and fuel, which is needed for everyone basically. And even, you know, for those like aid which allowed to go into Gaza, it includes some of its rice, for example. If you don't have water to cook rice, it's become useless. If you don't have fuel for the hospitals, if you don't have fuel for electricity, to pump water, you know, water in Gaza, it's saline. You need the salinization unit if you don't have fuel. So this is an excuse being used by the Israelis, which is not justifying what's going on, which is a massacre, which is catastrophic situation, and people are dying in Gaza.
We've been speaking about the horrific situation in Gaza over the past couple of days, but what we haven't been focusing on so much is violence over in the West Bank. What can you tell us?
Yeah, thank you for this. Actually, the international community also seems they forget about the West Bank. I want to remind all the people who see us, Palestinians are under occupation, West Bank and Gaza, which according to the international laws also, Israel, it's accountable for the basic needs. So far since October 7th, now we talk about over 1,300 people were arrested by the Israelis. Violence is really high. People killed in West Bank by the Israeli soldiers and by the Israeli illegal settlers who has no control over them. They just shoot people dead for no reason. Few communities were completely displaced in West Bank. So far, 2 people, Palestinian people, were arrested like for a few days in the Israeli jail and were killed in the jails. So also the international communities need to keep an eye here and pressure the Israelis. There is full siege over the West Bank, and there is a humanitarian crisis is happening now in West Bank, but the focus is more, you know, in Gaza. But I think also situation in West Bank needs attention from the international community. Unless the European leaders and the United Nations, United States of America and others